Okay, I know I'm already on your bad side if you've read the title of this video because, who am I to tell you what games you shouldn't play as an adult? I'm not the authority figure in your life, so you're probably automatically being like, whatever, I'll do what I want. But let me just explain what I'm thinking about here. The games on this list are bad now. That's the short version. The long version is that for various reasons, the games on this list have simply been surpassed graphically, reinterpreted in a far better way by new releases, are hampered by the technical issues of bygone console generations, or, well, they're just really not as good as you remember them being. If you still want to play these games and enjoy them, by all means, please do that. But if you're open to hear a couple of reasons why maybe it's not worth going back to them, that's what I got for you. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are 8 video games you shouldn't play as an adult. Number 8, Shadow of the Colossus, 2005. Put down your pitchforks, I'm not about to tell you that Shadow of the Colossus is a bad game, but what I am gonna do is tell you that you shouldn't be playing the 2005 version of Shadow of the Colossus. Don't play it. Play it if you want to, but you shouldn't, and I'm gonna tell you why. Loads of people played Shadow of the Colossus on or around the year 2005 when it first came out. In a year where you found yourself going to the movies to see Revenge of the Sith, being glad you didn't go to the movies to see Fantastic Four, and musing at the word sexting and glamping being added to the dictionary, perhaps you found yourself delving into this action-adventure masterwork by Japan Studio and Team Ico. If you did check this one out back in 2005, and honestly anywhere between that and 2018, then I have no qualm with you. If, however, you decided to pick this bad boy up after 2018, then you done goofed. That's because in 2018, the absolutely phenomenal Blue Point Games remake came out, and it surpasses the original in every way. That is to say, it takes everything fantastic about the original and keeps all those elements central and sacred while elevating the graphics, tightening the controls, upscaling the resolution, and pocketing a decent handful of 10 out of 10s from publications and players alike. Basically, I'm saying you shouldn't play Shadow of the Colossus as an adult, but you definitely should play Shadow of the Colossus. Make sense? Okay, good. Number 7, Kingdom Hearts. Moving on from an entry that wouldn't have too many of you clutching your pearls to one that I think might rock a few boats. If you'll forgive me mixing metaphors, Kingdom Hearts is a tricky one when it comes to its subject matter. Beloved by many, but let's face it, kind of overly complicated, narratively disjointed, and sort of full of plot holes, Kingdom Hearts might be one of those games that's better left in your childhood where those things were more easily forgiven. The Disney cameo, saturated cartoon world, and wild series of events are a total treat when you're young. But now we've come to expect more from our games, and it's tough for even the most diehard of fans to see past the naivety. If you can see past it and you have fond memories of Square's 2002 JRPG, you might be able to get back into that headspace where a little silliness is forgivable. But I'd caution anyone with a mind to try out Kingdom Hearts in 2024. There's certainly a charm to the game world and Sora's journey that dazzled players a couple of decades ago, but even with the relatively well-received 2012 HD remaster, Kingdom Hearts 3 with its deeply confusing narrative seemed to suggest the series is showing its age. At least Kingdom Hearts does have the chance to evolve and grow with its audience if Square Enix so chooses, which is a lot more than I can say for this next entry. Number 6, LEGO Studios Backlot. I could have given this slot to the certainly critically superior and more popular open world game LEGO Island, but I've gone ahead and put the spotlight on LEGO Studios Backlot instead, because that's the game I tried to go back to this year and realized sometimes you can't go home again. The 2001 adventure platformer was a browser-based game that put you in the little LEGO shoes of an intern who was put to work at the LEGO Studios. In retrospect, this bite-sized chunk of nostalgia is riddled with all the adventure of helping Johnny Thunder find his gear and standing in as a stuntman wherein you have to shoot yourself out of a cannon. In reality though, as soon as you're told to use the Z key to run and Control to talk, that should have been the sign that this one was better left in your memory. As one of the healthy handful of browser-based games that dominated the years of those who grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, LEGO Backlot Studios is a prime example of a game that, should you play it as an adult, you'll quickly realize is much worse than you remember it being. Really, you'll have to trust me, ignorance is absolutely bliss on this one, and plenty of the other games on this list. Number 5, The Sims. The Sims may be one of the most influential and iconic games to ever spawn out of the medium, and has met with consistent critical and commercial success in the years since, but that doesn't mean you should play it as an adult. Not the first game, anyway. While there's nothing wrong with wanting to while away the hours in a digital world where you can play as someone who can do wild things like get married to someone after a first date or own a home, the original certainly is starting to show its age a little bit now that it's been 24 years. There are a handful of games on this list, including this one, that were once absolute must-plays. But now we've moved on so far technologically and creatively as an industry that while the titles will always hold their famed spot in gaming history, they're pretty unfulfilling to return to. In this case, the graphics are tricky to stomach, the systems are yet to be refined, and most of the mechanics will have you daydreaming about the game's sequels that iterated on the most dated features and invented whole new ones which drastically improve your experience playing the game. While it's probably a fair statement that everyone should give The Sims a go at least once in their lifetime, even if life simulation games aren't really your thing, that doesn't mean you need to go all the way back to the first one. You can pretty much just YouTube the timeline of the Goth family and you'll be all caught up. Number 4, Far Cry 3. Another absolute classic that just doesn't quite hit the same anymore, thanks in large part to the simple facts of time, technology, and the natural progression of both console generations and its very own franchise, is Far Cry 3. Launching in 2012, Far Cry 3 took kind of a hard left from Far Cry 2, which, despite being praised for things like its world design and the freedom with which you can engage with that world, was criticized for things like its malaria mechanic, the wonky AI, and its malaria mechanic. Aside from deciding not to make the final boss of the game trying not to get malaria, Far Cry 3 changed things up by pulling the focus over to its engrossing story, larger-than-life villains, consistently bombastic and free-form combat engagements, rich narrative, and deep world-building. Also, radio towers. That's right, climb tall tower, unlock area, find cool stuff, get gear, and repeat. Like, to be fair, this wasn't overdone at this stage. It already existed in Assassin's Creed, but this is the first time we'd seen it in a modern setting. It would become a meme, but it wasn't a meme yet. Then Far Cry 4 used them, and Watch Dogs used them, and basically every AC game after that. Not only that, but the Far Cry series continued to swap out bad dudes and locations, but otherwise kept much of the format the same. So the Far Cry games of today structurally aren't too different to Far Cry 3 from 2012. In essence, that basically means you'll likely either find yourself tired of the game's tropes that are now well and truly overused, or if you're not tired of them, then you'd be better off finding a later iteration of what Far Cry nailed in its own series, or those that have been inspired by it. Number 3, GoldenEye 007. I promise I'm not putting games on this list to hurt you, I'm genuinely trying to help you, and I've been the victim of this one as well. If you haven't gone back and tried to play Rare's 1997 shooter recently, you should probably keep it that way. While GoldenEye 007 was celebrated for offering up a cutting-edge gaming experience with, and I must quote, detailed environments, outstanding graphics, realistic animations, and deeply intuitive controls, all of those things were true in 1997, and perhaps even through to the end of the Nintendo 64 lifecycle, but by then games had moved on, and by now we've moved so far on that unless you pick this one up again with expectations properly couched in this being a product of its time, you'd be hard-pressed to enjoy it. Worse still, if you never picked this one up but heard all the hubbub about it and you reckon it's time to dig back in and see what it's all about, there are better ways to spend your time. Anyone with experience in modern games will likely find the controls frustratingly dated and, without mods, clunky at best, and dare I say, literally unplayable at worst. Nostalgic? Absolutely, but worth your hard-earned dollars? Probably not. If you remember this one being flawless, you're better off letting it stay that way. Number 2, Uncharted: Drake's Fortune. If you were late to the party with the Uncharted series starring charming rogue Nathan Drake and all his action-adventure antics, do yourself a favor and don't go back to the beginning. I say that because that's what I did, and while Uncharted the First made serious waves back in 2007 and at the start of the PS3 lifecycle, it's now been a lot of time since then, and now it's really just ripples rather than waves. Ripples and Tom Holland. The phenomenal story-forward action shooter from Naughty Dog sold like hotcakes, but largely due to the medium's reliance on interactivity and technology, not to mention how quickly it grows and changes, it just ain't what it used to be. Just like many of the games on this list, none of it takes away from what a landmark title this was, but on a replay or first-time playthrough these days, you'll probably find yourself struggling with the yet-to-be-refined controls and exasperated with the repetitive waves of enemies and samey combat arenas. It's really only in retrospect that you'll notice the game's shortcomings, even in the face of its stellar story and cast. It's not Uncharted's fault that technology moves so quickly, but Naughty Dog was still experiencing the growing pains of how to involve players best in its open world, and it was still nailing just how they were going to make platforming work and combat work, which it sometimes gets right, and a lot of times doesn't get right. This is best represented by Uncharted 2, which is essentially better than its predecessor in every way. If you want to check it out in remake form, you certainly can, but if you feel worn out a few hours in and want to throw in the towel, I won't tell anybody. Number 1. Donkey Kong 64. Donkey Kong 64 arrived in 1999, and like most of that first wave of Nintendo 64 3D platformers, it hasn't aged all that well. Despite standing as a vital stepping stone for video games that had been and those still yet to be, as well as setting the stage for loads of fond childhood memories, the N64 was an awkward proving grounds for not only how to make 3D controls work, but also who games should be for. Donkey Kong 64 is certainly one of the games of its era designed with kids in mind, so that rosy memory you've got of it being hilarious, exciting, and pretty much the best thing ever that was in no way dragged down by a repetitive collectathon might be a touch swayed by your nostalgia. It's not that Donkey Kong 64, or Super Mario 64 for that matter, did anything wrong, it's just that platformers have come so far, you're better off picking up one of the newer games featuring your Nintendo mascot of choice, which are all equally fantastic. All that said, and all nostalgia accounted for, you definitely didn't overhype your memory of how good the DK rap is, because that still slaps. You should go listen to it right now and then thank me later.